So it looks like we're 2 weeks into October and finally fall has arrived. It kind of seems these days that, well, especially this week, you have to talk about the weather. Now, usually we talk about the weather to avoid talking about other stuff, like, how are you? Fine, how are you? So nice weather we're having. Yes, it is. Well, good to see you. Have a nice day. Bye. But now it's different. Now it's really not possible to ignore the topic of the weather, and this time it's not pleasant. We hardly go a week anymore without another devastating storm somewhere in the world. Everybody knows somebody who is digging out of a flooded, windblown mess. And let's be honest here, this new normal is not God's doing. It is not a divine apocalyptic plan. This is our doing. This is a path that we have been on for decades that we don't want to see because we think it might cost us too much to change. And this made me think that the story that we're reading today from our scriptures, well, maybe it isn't as distant as we might think. This day in the life of Jesus is as fresh as the news and just as difficult as it was for the people involved at the time to hear. Jesus was on the road again when a wealthy man ran up and very respectfully asked him, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus, maybe sensing some flattery there, answered, "Well, why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone. And I'm sure that you know the commandments. You should not murder or commit adultery or steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not defraud another. And you should honor your father and your mother." And the man said to him, "Well, teacher, I have kept all these things since I was young." And then Jesus, looking at him, loved him and said, "You lack one thing." Jesus loved him, and because he loved him, he said the truthful thing, the hard thing, the words he knew would cause this young man's enthusiasm to dissipate. "Sell what you own, give to the poor, and follow me." And then our story tells us that the man was shocked and went away grieving because he had many possessions. And well, maybe he was shocked because he considered his wealth, well, an entitlement. It was a symbol not only of his personal accomplishment, but of God's favor. So how shocking and discouraging to be told that his credentials were actually, well, a liability. And why was he going away sad? Was it because Jesus told him to sell everything? Or maybe he was realizing that he already was an unhappy person. Because he came to Jesus as a wealthy man, an upstanding citizen, a good man by all accounts, but he came still looking for something more. He still needed somehow to justify his life. He needed to know how he could find that elusive, ultimate happiness. And he didn't get the reassurance he was looking for. Reverend Keith Giles suggests that he didn't get the answer he was looking for because in God's kingdom, everything is upside down from the reality that we are used to. Because the first are last, and the humble are exalted, and the proud are made low, and the greatest is the servant. In fact, success in God's realm looks like total failure to the world we live in. Giving away your possessions, sharing with people who can't pay you back, forgiving someone who doesn't deserve it, loving people who can only hurt you, all of these things seem like failure to those who are steeped in, well, common sense. It makes no sense. Why would we give up what we have earned? Why would we lay down our lives for people who don't deserve it? Why would Jesus even suggest giving away all this good stuff that this good man owned? Why, we might ask, would all these many possessions make him or us unhappy? And it's not so much the possessions themselves, but of course his use and maybe our use of them that used to make ourselves feel justified in our lives. It's that whole drive to be first, to be best, to be more important. That's the thing that Jesus keeps trying to expose and change. Maybe because there is a high cost to those rivalries that our drive to be first brings about. The cost of us being able somehow to live together in peace. Harold Kushner notes in his book, When All You Ever Wanted Is Not Enough, that our souls are not hungry for fame or comfort or wealth or power. Those rewards create as many problems as they solve. For our souls are hungry for meaning, for the sense that we have figured out how to live so that our lives matter, so that the world will at least be a little bit different and a little bit better for our having passed through. Now it's interesting, Jesus said to this man, there is one thing you lack, but he didn't say what that one thing was. Now he suggested that solution to that thing might be to give away all his stuff, but that doesn't really answer the question. What was he lacking? I think the answer is in the question. The answer to what was that one thing that he lacked is found in the question that he asked. What must I do to inherit eternal life? For this was a person who had the means and the power to influence many lives. He had family and friends. He had employees, most likely slaves. He had clients that he did business with. He had a community who looked up to him. And yet, his focus was singular. How can I secure my own place of safety with the Creator? Maybe if his heart had been filled with compassion and empathy for those around him, he might have asked, Good teacher, what can we do to inherit God's life of grace? Or maybe, what can I do with all that I've been given and all that I have accomplished to lead these people in my care into your kingdom? But he saw himself as independent and independently wealthy and independently responsible only for himself. I suspect that Jesus figured that if he gave away everything, he would be dependent on his friends for his next meal, a place to stay, a coat to wear, and maybe his eyes would be open to the reality that we are all interdependent, just as we are dependent on God. When Jesus says, follow me, he's looking for more than just a verbal agreement. But why? Why can't God allow us just simply to put our name on a list saying that we are for God instead of actually being involved in the world? Why can't God build God's kingdom on good intentions? Can't God just help the hungry feed themselves or the lonely care for themselves? Can't those burdened in life just lift themselves up? Why do I have to be involved? If I'm taking care of myself, why do I have to be helping others? Maybe because that's just not how life works. That's not how our hearts and our minds are wired. That's not what we were created for. We're created for relationship and not just the easy ones. We're created and called to use every gift and skill and talent and resource that we have to care for one another, all others, especially the least of these, those without a voice, without the means and the resources to live and thrive on their own. Well, that brings us back to the weather. Leah Shade speaks the truth that we don't want to hear. As she writes, the latest UN report says that we have 10 years to get climate change under control. And we will have to completely retool our energy consumption or face catastrophic global consequences due to global warming and climate disruption. And this will require rethinking our economy, giving up a worldview and a way of thinking about ourselves that we are holding on to for dear life. This changing climate has already meant death for thousands of people who perished in just the last year from hurricanes and typhoons, supercharged by the warming waters of climate change. It has meant death for thousands of species whose names I can't even pronounce, who I've never seen. It has meant death of people in hot zones where temperatures are rising to unprecedented levels, where sea levels are swallowing up homes and villages, where droughts are squeezing the life out of land and animals and people. And most of them are poor. To them, I am the rich, young, or maybe not so young man or woman. She continues to speak for us, saying, I am part of the problem because I benefit from a system that enables me to live the way I do while they bear the burden of the ecological costs. While they live in poverty and die of diseases and watch their homes destroyed, I live in my house and I eat tasty food and I drive my car and I fly to conferences and I upgrade my cell phones and. And then there is Jesus, and there he goes again. Jesus keeps coming at me, a rich, so not so young woman, and he keeps looking at me, and he keeps loving me. And I'm not sure I want that kind of love, a love that sees right through my pretenses. A love that makes me turn away grieved because I would rather cling to my possessions than to have my hands open to receive this elusive treasure of heaven. So I'm sorry, Jesus. I'm not ready to let go. His followers felt that way too when they gasped, but who can be saved? And Jesus looked at them and said, for mortals it is impossible, but not for God. For God all things are possible. There's that look again of love, a fierce, not letting go of me until I let go kind of love. We will end up letting go of a lot of things that we think we can't live without. And we can wait until it's too late to choose. Or we can choose to ask God now, where do I start? What do I need to do so that we all might live, so that we all might inherit your life of love that is the only thing that is eternal? I think the first thing that we need to give up is the desire to believe that everything is okay and that it's not my responsibility. We may need to give up our desire to stay in the shadows and go unnoticed while other stronger, braver people speak up for the poor and for the children whose futures we are trading for our comfort now. Anne Lamott said, I wish I had a magic wand and could make people in power believe in climate science, but I don't. But I do, however, have good shoes in which to march for science and for sanity. There is something that each of us can do with the resources we have been given, with whatever our talents and our skills and our opportunities that lie before us. We can do something. And Sharon Blizzard reminds us not to be too discouraged, recognizing that we are all works in progress, And by faith, we may grow gracefully into generous people who do love God with all that we have. And then the miraculous truth will come to light, for it is in the giving up that we receive the daily bread, the all that we need, and all that our God-filled hearts desire. Who then can be saved? Everyone can, by the grace of the amazing God of possibility, the author and perfecter of our faith, the God who loves us with that uncomfortable love, calling us out to be more than we thought we could be kind of love. We can choose to accept that love, we can choose to follow, or we can walk away grieving.